1 week after we moved into our new home, my phone rang at 9:17 p.m. The man on the line didn't introduce himself. He didn't ask how I was settling in. He just said I forgot to disconnect the living room camera. Then he paused, long enough for my stomach to drop. "I saw what your father and your brother did while you were on base," he continued. My grip tightened around the phone. "Don't tell anyone," he said quietly. "Come see me. Alone." I didn't answer him right away. I stood there in the dim kitchen, the low hum of the refrigerator filling the silence, my new house still smelling faintly of fresh paint and cardboard boxes. My husband was in the living room folding flattened boxes for recycling, the soft scrape of tape peeling in the background. Normal sounds, safe sounds. Sounds that didn't match the cold spreading through my chest. "Who is this?" I asked, finally keeping my voice level. Years in uniform had trained me not to give emotion away for free. "It doesn't matter," the man said. "What matters is what I saw." I recognized his voice then. The previous owner, Mark. A man in his late 50s, recently divorced, polite to a fault. When we'd signed the final papers, he'd shaken my hand and thanked me for my service, like it meant something personal to him. I remembered thinking he looked relieved to be done with the house, ready to move on. "I thought you reset everything when you sold," I said. "I did," he replied. "At least I thought I did. Turns out the camera was still linked to my old cloud account. I only realized because I got a motion alert. My pulse ticked up, but my posture didn't change, and instead of deleting it, you watched." "I didn't mean to," he said quickly, "but once I saw who it was, I couldn't look away." I leaned against the counter, the cool stone grounding me. "What exactly did you see?" Another pause. Shorter this time. Controlled. "Your father, your brother, in your living room, late. They weren't there to reminisce." I closed my eyes for a brief second, just long enough to keep myself steady. "You said not to tell anyone," I said. "Why?" Because he lowered his voice. They talked like people who don't expect consequences. And people like that tend to notice when things start to shift. I thanked him. I don't remember the exact words, just that they came out calm and professional, like I was ending a call with a contractor, not being handed the thread that might unravel my family. When I hung up, I didn't move. I stood there staring at the dark window over the sink, my reflection faint and warped. 42 years old. Staff sergeant. Wife, homeowner, daughter. My husband looked up. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said automatically. "Just someone from the sale, a loose end." He nodded, trusting me the way he always had. That trust sat heavy on my shoulders as I walked down the hall to our bedroom and closed the door behind me. I sat on the edge of the bed and let myself breathe. 1 week. That's how long we'd been here. 1 week of unpacking, of learning which floorboard creaked near the stairs, of neighbors waving as they walked their dogs past our fence. 1 week of believing the chaos was behind us. Before the move, before the boxes and the signatures and the sense of finally landing somewhere permanent, I'd been on base. Stateside, but buried in a rotation that left little room for personal matters. Long days, early mornings, the kind of schedule that makes you grateful for predictability and blind to anything beyond your immediate mission. My father knew that. My brother knew that too. Growing up, I'd been the steady one. The kid who followed rules, the one teachers trusted and neighbors complimented. My brother Chad had been the opposite. Charismatic, reckless, always chasing the next thing, whether it was a job, a scheme, or an excuse. And my father had spent a lifetime smoothing things over for him. "He just needs time," Dad used to say. "He's finding his footing. Family helps family." I'd heard those words so many times they'd stopped sounding like explanations and started sounding like policy. Still, I never thought, not this. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from my father. "Hope you're settling in okay. Let me know if you need anything." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. The timing felt off. Too neat. Like a chess move placed just early enough to seem casual. I typed a reply, then erased it. Typed again. Erased it again. Instead, I opened my notes app and started a new file. Timeline. It was a habit I'd picked up years ago. When things didn't add up, you wrote them down. Dates, times, names, facts. Feelings came later. I wrote the date of our move, the date of Mark's call, The time 9:17 p.m. I noted that my father had known my schedule, that he'd had access to the house while I was away, that Chad had been between jobs again according to Dad's last voicemail. I remembered the small things I'd brushed off before deployment ended, calls that went unanswered, conversations that felt rushed. A strange comment Chad had made once about how nice it must be to have a house just sitting there. At the time I'd laughed it off. Now it echoed differently. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling fan turning slowly overhead. I thought about the house Mark had sold us. The living room where he said the camera still was. The same living room where my father and brother had stood thinking no one was watching. And I thought about something Mark had said before hanging up. They talked about you like you were unavailable, he'd said. Like you were a resource, not a person. That hurt more than I expected. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't storm back into the living room and demand answers. I lay there and listened to the steady rhythm of the fan and the muffled sounds of my husband cleaning up for the night. In the military, you learn that panic wastes time. You learn that the first report is never the full picture. And you learn that when someone tells you not to tell anyone, it's usually because the truth has weight. I picked up my phone again and sent Mark a single text. "Where can we talk?" The reply came almost instantly. "Tomorrow morning, coffee shop on Route 7, back booth. Please come alone." I locked the phone and set it face down. Whatever my father and my brother had done, they'd done it while I was serving, while I trusted that home was being left alone. And cameras, it turned out, didn't care about trust. I arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes early, not because I was eager, but because habit had taught me that being late gave other people control. The place sat just off Route 7, the kind of spot retirees favored in the mornings. Vinyl booths, laminated menus, a bell over the door that chimed softly when someone came in. The smell of burnt coffee and buttered toast hung in the air, oddly comforting. Mark was already there. He sat in the back booth like he'd said, shoulders slightly hunched, hands wrapped around a ceramic mug he hadn't touched. He looked older than I remembered. Not in years, but in weight, like the last few weeks had pressed down on him harder than expected. I slid into the seat across from him and set my phone face down on the table. "You came," he said, relief and anxiety tangled in his voice. I said I would. He nodded, then glanced around, checking the room out of habit rather than necessity. At this hour, no one was paying attention. A couple argued quietly over a crossword. A woman in a denim jacket read the newspaper like it was still 1998. "I didn't sleep," Mark said. "Not after I realized what I had." "What you have," I corrected gently. He swallowed, right. He pulled a small laptop from his bag and turned it so the screen faced me. His hands shook just enough to be noticeable. "I want to be clear," he said. "I didn't install the camera to spy on anyone. It was part of the security system when I was living alone. After the divorce, it made me feel safer. I thought I disconnected everything when I moved." "I believe you," I said, and I did. He clicked a few keys, then paused, looking at me. "Once you see this, things change." "I know." The video loaded without ceremony. Grainy, but clear enough. A wide view of the living room. The couch we'd just replaced, the old bookshelf Mark had left behind the window that faced the street. A timestamp glowed faintly in the corner. Then the door opened. My father stepped inside first, moving with the confidence of someone who felt entitled to the space. Chad followed slower, glancing around like he was checking for witnesses. I felt something tighten behind my ribs. Neither of them noticed the camera. They stood in the center of the room, my father holding a manila folder. Chad dropped into the armchair like he owned it, kicked off his shoes and laughed. "She won't know," Chad said. "Not for weeks." Dad frowned. "Lower your voice." "Why?" Chad shrugged. "She's on base. She's always on base." The casual dismissal stung more than I expected. Dad sat down and opened the folder, spreading papers across the coffee table. Even through the low resolution, I recognized the format. Legal documents, signatures, boxes checked with firm strokes. "I don't like this," Dad said, "but we don't have a choice." Chad leaned forward. "You always say that." "This isn't about liking it," Dad snapped. "This is about helping family." I closed my eyes for half a second, then forced them open again. "Fast sale," Chad continued. Cash buyer. Benson says he can move it in under 2 weeks if we don't ask questions. Dad hesitated, and the money. Straight to my account first, Chad said. Then we settle the rest. You promised. I promised I'd fix it, Chad cut in. This fixes it. There was a silence then, the kind that fills a room when everyone knows they're crossing a line but no one wants to be the first to name it. She makes good money, Dad finally said. She'll recover. That sentence landed harder than any insult I'd ever heard. She's strong, he continued, almost convincing himself. She's always been strong. Chad smiled. Exactly. Mark paused the video. I didn't realize my hands had clenched until he slid a napkin toward me. Do you want to stop? He asked quietly. No, I said. My voice surprised even me with how steady it sounded. Keep going. He hit play again. The next few minutes were worse. They talked logistics, dates. Who would say what if I asked questions? Chad joked about how military folks never read the fine print. Dad laughed once nervously, then fell silent. At one point, Chad stood up and paced. She's not going to sue her own family, he said. She won't want the mess. Dad nodded slower this time. She hates conflict. I felt a strange, hollow ache at that. They weren't wrong about my dislike for conflict. They were wrong about what I'd do to avoid it. The video ended the way it began, without drama. Chad grabbed the folder. Dad turned off the lights. The door closed. Mark shut the laptop. I watched it 3 times, he said, hoping I'd misunderstood. You didn't. I know, he whispered. I sat back against the booth, letting the vinyl creak beneath me. My reflection stared back from the dark screen of the laptop, calm, composed, and very far away. They mentioned a name, I said. Benson. Mark nodded. He handled the paperwork on my sale, too. Slippery guy. Always in a hurry. Did you ever see a lawyer when you sold? Mark shook his head. He said it wasn't necessary. Said it would slow things down. I exhaled slowly. There it was, the same pattern, fast, quiet, convenient. Why tell me, I asked? Mark met my eyes. Because my sister served. Because I know what it costs to trust people while you're gone. And because if I didn't, I'd be part of it. I nodded. I'll need copies. I've already made them, he said quickly. Encrypted drive, cloud backup, dates and timestamps intact. Good, I thought. Very good. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what had just shifted settling between us. They don't know you saw this, Mark said. No. And they don't know I called you? Not yet. He hesitated. What are you going to do? I thought of my father's text. Chad's grin. The way they'd talked about me like I was a line item on a balance sheet. I'm not going to confront them, I said. Not yet. Mark looked relieved and concerned all at once. In my line of work, I continued, you don't act on the first piece of intelligence. You verify, you document, you prepare. And then I said, sliding out of the booth, you let the truth speak for itself. As I walked toward the door, the bell chimed softly again. I stepped into the cool morning air, the sun just beginning to warm the pavement. Behind me in a quiet coffee shop off Route 7, the past had caught up. And for the first time since the call the night before, I knew exactly what I was dealing with. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I sat in my car in the parking lot, engine off hands, resting loosely on the steering wheel. The morning traffic moved past in steady waves, people headed to work, to errands, to lives that still made sense. I watched them without really seeing them, replaying fragments of the video in my head like a loop I couldn't turn off. She won't know. She'll recover. She's strong. Strength, I'd learned, was often just another excuse people used to take from you. I started the engine and drove not toward my house, but toward the base. It wasn't an emotional decision. It was muscle memory. When things went sideways, you returned to structure, to places where the rules were clear and the paperwork mattered. At my desk, I locked the door and pulled out a yellow legal pad. Not my phone, not my laptop. Paper had weight. Paper forced you to slow down. At the top, I wrote one word: facts. Under it, I listed everything I knew without interpretation. Date and time of video. Names spoken aloud. Documents visible. Mention of fast sale. Mention of funds routed to Chad. Name: Benson. No adjectives, no conclusions. Then I opened a second page and wrote questions. What authority did my father actually have? What documents had been signed? Where were they filed? Was the property tied to any special protections? Who else knew? By noon, I had 3 pages filled. My chest felt tight, but my mind was clear. That was always the trade-off. Clarity hurt, but confusion hurt more. During lunch, I didn't eat. I walked down the hall to legal assistance. The sign outside was unassuming, the kind of place people walked past without noticing unless they needed it. I knocked once and stepped inside. A captain I'd met years earlier looked up. "Staff Sergeant Lawson, what brings you in?" "I need to ask some questions," I said, hypothetically. He smiled faintly. That's how they usually start. I didn't show him the video. Not yet. I described a situation instead. A deployed service member, a family member acting under supposed authority. Property transactions done quickly, quietly. He listened without interrupting, his pen moving steadily across a legal pad of his own. "Who held power of attorney?" he asked. "My father." "And what kind?" "General, for financial matters." He nodded slowly. General POA allows certain actions. It does not give carte blanche, especially not when it comes to real property. I felt a small shift inside me, not relief, direction. What if the service member wasn't notified? I asked. "That complicates things," he said. "What if the property was purchased while the service member was active duty?" "It was." "And financed how?" I hesitated. "VA-backed loan." His pen stopped. "That changes the stakes," he said carefully, significantly. He explained it plainly without drama. Protections, notifications, oversight, federal implications if procedures weren't followed. Words like unauthorized and misrepresentation and fraud were used but never shouted. "Do you have documentation?" he asked. "I'm collecting it." "Good," he said. "Collect everything, don't confront anyone yet, and don't warn them." I nodded. That part came easy. Back at my desk, I logged into the county recorder's website. Public records were exactly that, public. It took 20 minutes and 2 false starts before I found what I was looking for. There it was. A filing from 3 weeks earlier. My property. A transaction marked processing. Not completed. My name still appeared on the record, but another name had been added. A placeholder. Incomplete. Like someone had opened a door and not stepped through it yet. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. They'd been in a hurry. Too much of a hurry. That afternoon my phone buzzed again. Dad. I let it ring. Then Chad. Straight to voicemail. By the time I left base, the sky had shifted to that pale gray that comes before evening. I sat in traffic and thought about how confident they'd sounded in that video. How sure they were that I wouldn't push back. That I'd choose peace over truth. They'd confused silence with weakness. At home, my husband asked how my day went. I told him I had some legal loose ends to tie up from the move. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. After dinner, I went into the spare room and plugged in the encrypted drive Mark had given me. I watched the footage again, this time with a different eye. Not as a daughter, as a witness. I noted timestamps, exact phrases. The moment Chad mentioned routing funds. The moment Dad said I'd recover. Then I backed it up twice. Before bed, I checked my phone one last time. A new text from my father. "We should talk soon." I set the phone down without replying. Because talking was easy. What I was doing now took discipline. And discipline, unlike trust, had never failed me. I went to see my father 2 days later. Not because I was ready to confront him, and not because I owed him anything. I went because patterns reveal themselves when people think they're still in control. And my father very much believed he was. He lived in the same house I'd grown up in, a modest place at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. The lawn was trimmed. The flag on the porch hung straight. From the outside, everything looked exactly as it always had, orderly, respectable, untouched by consequence. Chad's truck was already there. I parked at the curb and sat for a moment watching the front door. I wasn't nervous. If anything, I felt strangely detached, like I was about to walk into a briefing I already knew the outcome of. My father opened the door before I knocked. "There you are," he said, forcing a smile. I was starting to worry. About what I asked. He waved a hand. You've been distant." I stepped inside without answering. The house smelled like old coffee and lemon cleaner. Familiar. Too familiar. Chad was in the living room, stretched out on the couch, boots on the armrest. He looked up and smirked. "Well, if it isn't the homeowner," he said. "How's married life in the suburbs?" I took a seat across from him, folding my hands in my lap. Calm, neutral, waiting. Dad cleared his throat. "I thought we could talk, like adults." "I'm listening," I said. He sat down slowly, choosing the chair closest to me. "You've seemed tense lately." Chad laughed. "That's military life, always wound tight." I looked at him. "You seem relaxed." "Someone has to be." Dad shot him a warning look, then turned back to me. "If something's bothering you, you can tell us." There it was, the invitation, the trap. "When did you last go to my old house?" I asked. The question landed harder than I expected. Dad blinked. "Why?" "Just answer it." He hesitated. "Not long, but long enough. A few weeks ago." Chad shifted on the couch. We were checking on things, making sure it was secure. I nodded. "Late at night." Dad stiffened. "Who told you that?" I leaned back slightly, "So it was late." Chad rolled his eyes. "What is this, an interrogation?" "No," I said. "It's a conversation. You offered." Dad's jaw tightened. "We didn't do anything wrong." "I didn't say you did." Another pause, thicker this time. "You're not here to accuse us, are you?" Chad asked. I met his gaze. "I'm here to understand what you thought you were doing." Dad's voice dropped. "We were trying to help." "Who?" I asked. He didn't answer. "Because from where I'm sitting," I continued, "it looks like you made decisions about my property while I was unavailable." Chad snorted. "You're always unavailable." That one stung, but I didn't show it. "I trusted you," I said to my father. "That's not an accusation. It's a fact." Dad rubbed his temples. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "Am I?" "You weren't using the house," Chad added. "It was just sitting there." I turned to him. "You don't get to decide what's just sitting when it isn't yours." His smile faltered. Dad leaned forward. "This family has always shared resources." I let the words hang for a moment. Shared implies consent. Silence. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. "You're acting like we betrayed you," Dad said quietly. "I'm acting like I'm asking questions," I replied, "and you're avoiding answers." Chad stood up. "This is pointless." He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, then stopped. "You know, for someone who hates conflict, you sure know how to stir it up." I watched him leave without a word. When the door closed, my father sagged slightly in his chair. "You don't trust me anymore," he said. I considered that. Trust isn't a switch, it's a record. His eyes met mine. "And what does my record say?" I thought of the video, of his voice saying I'd recover, of the way he'd convinced himself it was for the best. "It says you made choices for me," I said, "without me." He looked away. "I'm asking you one last time," I continued. "Did you sign anything related to my house while I was on base?" He swallowed. "I had authority." "That's not what I asked." "Yes," he said finally, "I signed." There it was, clean, simple, undeniable. I stood up. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To handle it." "Handle what?" I turned back at the door. "The consequences." His face paled. "Don't do this." "I didn't," I said. "You did." As I walked out, I noticed Mrs. Halpern from 2 houses down watering her plants. She glanced up, recognition flickering across her face. "Welcome home, dear," she said warmly. "Thank you," I replied. The irony wasn't lost on me. Behind me, my father stood in the doorway of a house he still believed was safe. He was wrong. The sheriff's office sat just off Main Street, a low brick building with faded flags out front, and a parking lot that always seemed half full no matter the hour. I'd been there before for community meetings, for neighborhood events, but never like this. Never carrying a folder that heavy, even if the paper inside didn't weigh much. Inside, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. A bell chimed softly as I stepped through the door. The deputy at the front desk looked up, glasses perched low on his nose. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said. "I need to file a report." He glanced at the folder tucked under my arm, then back at my face. Something in my expression must have told him this wasn't about a stolen bike or a noise complaint. "Have a seat," he said. "Someone will be right with you." I didn't sit. I stood off to the side, hands, steady eyes, scanning the room out of habit. A man filled out paperwork at a counter. Another waited on a bench, staring at the floor. Ordinary people. Ordinary problems. Mine just happened to involve blood. A woman in her early 30s approached me a moment later, hair pulled back, tight uniform crisp. "I'm Deputy Morales. Let's talk." Her office was small but orderly. She gestured for me to sit, then took the chair across from me, notebook open. "Tell me what brings you in today," she said. I started at the beginning. Not childhood, not feelings, just facts. I described the property, my service status, the timeline, the supposed authority my father held, the actions taken while I was unavailable. I told her about the intermediary Benson and the rushed nature of the transaction. Then I slid the encrypted drive across the desk. "There's video," I said, time-stamped, clear audio. She didn't react outwardly, but her eyes sharpened. Where did this come from? "The previous homeowner," I replied, unintentionally. She nodded slowly. "We'll need to verify chain of custody." "I understand." She plugged the drive into her computer and watched a short segment, stopping after less than a minute. She didn't need more. "That's significant," she said quietly. "I've already spoken with legal assistance on base," I added. "They advised me to document everything and not confront further." "Good advice," she said. "Did you bring any records from the county?" I handed her printed copies of the filings I'd pulled. She scanned them, lips pressing together. "Processing but not finalized," she murmured. "Someone was moving fast." "Yes." She leaned back in her chair. "This crosses into more than a civil matter." "I know." She met my eyes. "Are you prepared for what that means?" I didn't hesitate. "I didn't start this. I'm just ending it properly." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Here's what happens next." She explained the steps calmly. Statements, notifications, a temporary hold on any pending transactions, contacting the county prosecutor, looping in federal oversight due to my service status and the nature of the loan. None of it sounded dramatic. It sounded methodical. I found comfort in that. When I left the office, the sky had darkened. The air felt heavier, like a storm was building somewhere beyond the horizon. My phone buzzed before I reached my car. "Dad." I let it ring. Then Chad, again and again. By the time I drove home, I had 6 missed calls and 3 voicemails I didn't listen to. At dinner, my husband noticed. "You okay?" he asked gently. "I will be," I said. "But I need to tell you something." I told him everything, not in a rush, not all at once. He listened without interrupting, his face tightening with every new detail. "They did this while you were serving?" he asked quietly. "Yes." He reached across the table and took my hand. "Whatever you need, I'm here." That was the moment it hit me how different support feels when it isn't conditional. Later that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed again. A text from my father. "Please don't involve the police. We can fix this." I typed a response, then deleted it. Fixing something requires admitting it's broken. The next morning, Deputy Morales called. "We've contacted the county and the prosecutor," she said. "We're also reaching out to the intermediary you mentioned." "Benson." "Yes, he's familiar to us." That didn't surprise me. "And your father and brother?" I asked. "They'll be contacted," she said, officially. When I hung up, I sat in silence for a long moment. Not because I was afraid, because I knew this was the point of no return. Family has a way of convincing you that loyalty means silence, that love means absorbing damage so others don't have to. But silence doesn't protect you. It protects the people who hurt you. That afternoon, my father finally left a voicemail I listened to. His voice was strained. "Maria, please, this is getting out of hand. We can talk. We don't need outsiders." Outsiders, I thought, like the law. I didn't call him back. Instead, I drove past my old house on the way home. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I just looked at it through the windshield, at the windows that had seen more than anyone realized. The truth had been recorded. And now it was moving step by step exactly where it needed to go. The official meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning at 9. Neutral ground. That's what Deputy Morales had called it. A small conference room at the municipal building, the kind with gray walls, a long laminate table and chairs that were designed to be uncomfortable enough to keep conversations short and honest. No flags, no family photos, no places to hide behind familiarity. I arrived early again, of course I did. I sat at the table with my folder open in front of me, hands resting flat on the surface. Across the room, Deputy Morales spoke quietly with a man I recognized from her office, older, heavier build suit, worn thin at the elbows. County prosecutor. He nodded once in my direction, not smiling, not unkind. Then the door opened. My father walked in first. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, he was still tall, still straight-backed, but diminished, like the confidence he usually wore had been stripped away somewhere between his house and this room. Chad followed a step behind him, jaw tight, eyes darting. They took seats across from me. No one spoke for a moment. The silence felt different here, sharper, less forgiving. Deputy Morales cleared her throat. "Thank you all for coming. This is an official meeting regarding a pending investigation into unauthorized property transactions and potential misrepresentation." Chad scoffed softly. "This is ridiculous." The prosecutor turned to him. "You'll have an opportunity to speak. Right now, listen." Chad leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. My father stared at the table. Morales continued, "We're going to review evidence, clarify timelines, and explain next steps. This is not a negotiation." She looked at me. "Staff Sergeant Lawson, would you like to add anything before we begin?" I shook my head, no. I'd said everything that mattered already, on paper, on video. The prosecutor slid a tablet across the table and tapped the screen. The video loaded frozen on the first frame of my old living room. "We won't play the entire recording," he said. "Only the relevant portions." My father looked up then. Really looked. His eyes widened slightly. The video played. Chad's voice filled the room. "She won't know." My father's voice followed. "She'll recover." I watched their faces as they heard themselves. Chad's bravado drained first. His foot started bouncing under the table. My father's expression tightened, his mouth opening once as if to interrupt, then closing again. The prosecutor paused the video. "Mr. Lawson," he said to my father, "did you sign documents related to the sale or transfer of this property while your daughter was on active duty?" "Yes," my father said quietly. "Did you notify her?" "No." "Did you route funds from the transaction to your son?" Chad straightened. "That wasn't—" The prosecutor raised a hand. "We'll get to you." My father swallowed. "Yes." Chad's head snapped toward him. "Dad." "Enough," Morales said. The room felt like it had shrunk. "Mr. Lawson," the prosecutor continued, "were you aware that the property was financed through a VA-backed loan?" "Yes," my father said, "but I didn't understand." "Understanding isn't the standard," the prosecutor replied calmly. "Compliance is." He turned the tablet toward Chad. "Mr. Lawson, were you aware of these actions?" Chad hesitated. "I thought it was temporary. I thought we'd fix it." "Fix it how?" Chad looked down, once I got back on my feet. When the prosecutor asked, silence. "That's what I thought," he said. Deputy Morales slid a document across the table. "This outlines the next steps. There will be formal statements taken today. The transaction has been placed on hold. The intermediary you worked with is under investigation." Chad's face drained of color. "You said this guy was legit," he muttered to my father. My father didn't respond. He finally looked at me then, really looked. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, voice breaking. "I thought I was helping." I met his gaze steadily. "You helped yourself feel necessary. That's not the same thing." He flinched like I'd struck him. The prosecutor closed his folder. "This will proceed whether you're comfortable or not. I suggest you both consult legal counsel." The meeting ended without drama. No shouting, no apologies accepted or rejected. Just the slow scrape of chairs and the sound of a door closing behind people who had finally run out of excuses. Outside, the air felt cooler, cleaner. My father stopped me in the hallway. "Maria, please." I turned. "I don't know how to fix this," he said. "You don't," I replied gently. "You let it be fixed." He nodded, once eyes wet. Chad stood a few feet away staring at the floor. I walked past them without another word. Some lessons arrive late, but they still arrive. The weeks that followed moved more slowly than I expected. Not because nothing was happening, quite the opposite, but because real consequences don't rush. They unfold deliberately, one form, one interview, one hard conversation at a time. There were phone calls with attorneys, follow-up meetings with Deputy Morales, emails from the county clerk confirming what I already knew: the transaction had been formally voided. The intermediary, Benson, had stopped returning calls altogether. My old house was legally mine again, though it would be months before everything settled enough for me to step back inside without a deputy or a lawyer present. Strangely, that didn't bother me. Possession wasn't what I was fighting for anymore. Truth was, my father gave his formal statement 2 days after the meeting. It lasted nearly 3 hours. When he came out of the building, he looked exhausted in a way I'd never seen before. Not angry, not defensive. Just tired, like someone who'd finally carried his own weight instead of handing it off to someone else. Chad hired a public defender. That alone told me more than any apology could have. There was no dramatic arrest, no handcuffs, just restrictions, conditions, mandatory disclosures, the quiet dismantling of the illusion that what they'd done could simply be smoothed over. We didn't speak for a while. I focused on my life, on my marriage, on my work, on the routines that reminded me who I was outside of being someone's daughter. Every morning I drank coffee on the back porch of our new house and watched the light move across the yard. Every evening I locked the doors, not out of fear but out of habit. The house felt earned, honest. One afternoon Mark called. "I just wanted to check in," he said. "See how you're holding up." "I'm okay," I told him, "better than I was." "I'm glad I called you," he said. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't noticed that camera." "So do I." We said goodbye like people who'd shared something heavy and didn't need to carry it together anymore. A few days later, my father asked if we could talk. Not meet, not argue, just talk. We sat on a bench in a small park near his house, the kind with squeaky swings and a cracked basketball court. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, catching the gray in his hair. He looked older, smaller, more real. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said after a long silence. "I just need you to know. I see it now." I didn't respond right away. I convinced myself I was protecting the family, he continued, but what I was really doing was avoiding responsibility, and I used you to do it. That was the closest he'd come to the truth so far. "I don't know what our relationship looks like after this," I said finally, "but it won't look like it did before." He nodded. "I understand." We sat there for a while longer, watching a group of kids ride past on bikes, laughing like the world hadn't taught them better yet. When I left, I didn't feel relief or anger. I felt something quieter, acceptance. Some breaks don't heal cleanly, they just stop bleeding. A month later, I went back to my old house for the first time alone. The door creaked when I opened it. The air inside smelled stale, like a place that had been holding its breath. Dust motes floated in the sunlight streaming through the windows. The living room looked exactly as it had on the video. Empty now. Silent. I stood in the center of the room and looked up at the corner where the camera had once been. It was gone. But its work was done. I walked through each room, slowly touching the walls, the door frames, the windowsills. This house had been more than an asset. It had been a witness. To my effort, to my absence, to their choices. I locked the door behind me and handed the keys back to the attorney waiting outside. That chapter was finished. What I learned from all of this isn't complicated, but it is hard. Family doesn't give anyone the right to erase you. Love doesn't justify deception. And silence isn't peace, it's permission. If someone tells you not to ask questions, ask them anyway. If someone tells you to keep a secret that hurts you, reconsider who that secret is really protecting. And if you're the strong one, the reliable one, the one who's always expected to handle it, remember this: strength doesn't mean surrendering your boundaries. It means defending them. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of a moment when trust was tested or a line was crossed, I'd like to hear about it. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell me where you're listening from. We tell these stories so none of us has to carry them alone. We have many more stories to share, real, human, and hard won. So if you'd like to keep walking this path with us, subscribe and stay for the next one. Let's keep going, together.